that we say together, and so it is. Well, Merry Christmas, everyone. Lori and I wish each and every one of you a Merry Christmas, and we want you to know that we count you amongst the gifts in our life. We appreciate each and every one of you. Today we're going to try to bring together what we've been talking about for the last couple weeks and put them together into a different interpretation or a different understanding of the Christmas narratives as presented to us in the New Testament. So remember, we kind of said that if we look at scriptures of the world, I want you to consider something Emmett Fox told us. He said, when diamonds were first discovered in South Africa, and the people, the miners, were digging the diamonds, they were digging down and they found what they believed to be more diamonds in a cubic foot of soil than they had ever seen before. And they were elated, and they kept digging and they kept digging. But then they reached a different layer of soil, so a blue clay, we called it. And when they reached that layer of soil, they discovered even more diamonds per cubic foot than they had in the topsoil. And what Emmett Fox was telling us with this story is that the inspired works of the world, the scriptures of the world, work for us like that. That as we read them, as we study them, as we mull them over, not just in our mind, not just in the intellect, but as we allow that deeper meaning to reveal itself to us, we eventually come to the blue clay. We eventually come to a layer where suddenly everything takes on a different meaning, a deeper meaning for us. Not that the old meaning was wrong or bad, but a deeper meaning, a deeper understanding. See? And he likens our spiritual growth to this mining process. That as we grow, we are constantly going deeper and deeper and deeper. And we are discovering things that were there that we never saw before. As our hearts are opened, right? Let he who has ears hear, let him who has eyes see. We are starting to get things at a deeper level. And that's kind of where we're going today, where we've been going for the last month. So if we look at the structure of the Bible as we know it here, from the Old Testament to the New Testament, and keep in mind, this is only one world scripture. There are many religions, there are many world scriptures, and all of them talk about the light coming into the world. Lori and I, we were up at an ashram in Buckingham Courthouse, Virginia. It's called Yogaville. And there's a little temple there, and it's called Lotus, and it's Light of Truth Universal Shrine. And you go into this little temple, it looks like a big lotus flower sitting on the banks of the James River. And in the upper level, it's the top is in a round, and they have little fiber optic cables, little tubes coming in from the peak. And there's all these different tubes of light. And they run down the wall, and there's these little lecterns, and the light comes down, the tube of light comes down over the lecterns. And I think there's 13 there. There's one for each of what they have, the 12 major religions of the world, and then one for the yet to be discovered religion of the world. But on each lectern there's a book, a holy book for that particular religion, a scripture, and it's open to and highlighted passages about the light. So you remember I was saying, Carl Jung was telling us that there's part of us that is best described as subliminal. It's not unconscious, but we are not consciously aware of what is going on in it. And it speaks to us in symbols. And I mentioned his book, Man and His Symbols. He says we are kind of motivated largely by what's going on at that level below our conscious awareness. And this is in his study of psychology and his development of his techniques, why dream interpretation was so important. Because by learning to recognize those symbols, we can learn to understand what's going on below the level of conscious awareness. So we talked about how the Bible that we use largely in America they call it the Judeo-Christian Bible. But it's laid out, it starts out with the book of Genesis. And in the book of Genesis, we have this active separation of Adam and Eve leaving the garden. They were in an existence where they're in close relationship with the divine. And they left that existence into the experience of the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil. And then we come to the closing chapter, which is the book of Revelation, which is the mystical experience, the experience of the presence of the divine within, the experience of the Christ representing that person or that aspect of our being that recognizes its unity with divinity, with the oneness. So Jesus said, I and the Father are one, and you and I are one, and all I have done you can do as well. He's talking about the unity, the oneness. So if this realization of our oneness with the allness, our unity with all that there is, our unity with the divine presence, the realization that this life that we have is not our own life. We did not create it. This life is some part of the life of the divine expressing itself through us. See, then we start to tear down the barriers of separation, the barriers that are the reason that we are no longer in the garden. So we can look at the way that these series of books is laid out, and it's almost a roadmap for the growth of the soul. You see, we enter into this time-space experience here on planet Earth, and we're trying to figure out what in the world's going on. We're trying to make sense of it all. You know, as the Buddhists say, the game was in progress when we got here. We're just trying to figure out the rules as we go along. But within us, there is this desire to seek. There is this desire to know. There's this innate knowing that there's more. There's more. That we are part of something so much bigger. We are part of something that goes beyond, that transcends. Remember we talked about Emerson and the transcendentalist and their wild and crazy idea of what transcendentalism, like, my tongue is tied. What it means is that spirit transcends matter. And this is every religion. Spirit transcends matter. But at the time we have, and we still have with us, materialism, which says that, you know, there is no such thing as spirit, there's only matter. The transcendentalists say, oh no, there's spirit, you see. And I talked a little bit about what we get from the Eastern traditions. You know, that we must address the question to ourselves. We must satisfy ourselves with the answer to the question: did matter create consciousness, or did consciousness create matter? So there's something within us that is called to ponder and explore these deeper questions. And when we are ready, when we have reached a point where we are ready, you see, then we start to explore in earnest. We start to discover in earnest. So the journey for each one of us is different. It's on a different time scale. We have different experiences along the way. But somewhere along the way, there's this aha moment of there's more. There's more to be explored. There's another layer of soil. There's the blue clay layer that we need to go down to and mine deeper. So I'll give you one example that Fox gives us from the Old Testament, and then we will move into the Christmas narratives, because that's what we're talking about. What do these Christmas narratives mean in terms of symbolism for your spiritual growth, for my spiritual growth, for the collective spiritual growth of all souls here on earth at this time, all souls who have ever been here, all souls who will ever be here. What does this mean? So in looking at the Old Testament to make his point, in his book, The 10 Commandments, Emmett Fox says, take, for example, the commandment, thou shalt not steal. He said, now on the surface level, it's a very good commandment. It's very good advice. We shouldn't steal from one another. But that was not new to Moses. There was codification of laws in other cultures before Moses came along, and stealing was prohibited. So now we have the symbolism of Moses who's going up the mount, right? And he goes up the mount, and he's surrounded by the smoke and the trembling and the shaking of the ground and all of this dramatic scene. If you seen the movie with Charlton Heston, you can kind of see how the filmmaker laid it out. And Moses goes up, and there's the bush, and it's burning, and the fire doesn't consume, and he's speaking directly to God, right? Directly to God. And God says, tell them not to take each other's shoes. Good advice, don't steal. But maybe, perhaps, there's a deeper meaning to that. And if we start to consider the symbolism that everything in that story is there for a reason. When I was learning how to direct TV programs at the Access Studio in Charlotte, I became keenly aware that when you're watching a film or you're watching a TV show, everything that is in that frame is, or at least should be, there for a reason. The director made a conscious decision to include and exclude different things in the scene. So the idea is to include in the scene those things that add to to what is going on, to the point the scene is trying to make, and to exclude everything that distracts. And we want to think of these scriptures as being very, very artistically crafted works. Everything that is in there is there for a reason. And everything that is not in there is not in there for a reason. And by approaching them in this manner, we start to reach that blue clay. We start to discover the hidden or the esoteric meanings, if you want to think of it that way. And it doesn't mean, there's all these things that, people hid this from us because we might abuse it, and of course those things are true. But to me, it's hidden from us because we are not ready yet. We are not yet ready to understand them. So we come into the world as children, and we are told what to do. We are given the rules and the regulations, and we are told not to steal from one another, and all of these different things. And all of the power is out there somewhere, in our parents, in our teachers, in our clergy, in our government. Everything is out there, and we learn how to interact with the world at that level. But then we must enter into adulthood. We must start to make decisions for ourselves. And at that time, we say, well, wait a minute. Is everything that everybody told me true? Or is there another possibility? We start to develop our analytical skill of critical thinking. We start to examine the things that we were told and that we believed as a child, and we have to ask ourselves, do I want to keep this? Do I want to hold on to this idea? Do I want to hold on to this belief? Is it something that somebody explained to me as a child so that as a child I could understand it, but there is a deeper meaning now? And do I want to explore that deeper meaning? And this is when I talk about the levels of maturation of the soul. We go from the fundamentalist level of behavior and right and wrong and rules and regulations, which are a necessary part of our growth. But then we start to move into the Gnostic level of asking ourselves, well, what does that mean? Gnostic means knowing. Gnosis. Gnosis means knowing. Gnostic is one who is knowing. And we start to explore things with the intellect, see? And we start to ask questions. Well, what does that mean? And is that true? And how would I know that that is true? And is that true for me? It may be true, but not for me, you know. And at some point, as Dr. Holmes tells us, we arrive at the point where we start to realize that there is already a knower within. There is already this connection that you and I already have with the divine. Now, as long as we're not aware of it, as long as we don't acknowledge it, it may as well not be there for us. Remember, the law works for us according to our beliefs. So if we don't believe it's there, it acts as if it's not there. But we start to open up and we start to say, well, wait a second, you know. What is this thing called inspiration? What is this thing called revelation? What is this thing called intuition? Is it possible for me, who has ears, to hear it at a different level? Is it possible for me, who has eyes, to see at a different level? So what I'm suggesting is if we start to approach the narratives in the scriptures, and we start to say, hey, you know, everything that is there for a reason. It is structured in a certain way for a reason or reasons. And I may not have been aware of that, or I may not have known that. But nevertheless, I have to assume that this was all deliberate. This was all done deliberately. Remember, I told you there's some books in the Bible that is, you go from one chapter to the next, that every sentence has one more word. You know, it starts off, each sentence has the same number of words, and in the next chapter they each have one more words, or each chapter has one more sentence than the previous. I'm not sure which. But the point is that it's structured that way, and it's structured that way in symbolism. And just as Carl Jung says, you know, you really don't know yourself until you start to explore the symbols that your subliminal mind is giving to you. You have a whole part of yourself that is kind of occluded or hidden from your view. When we take these stories literally, we are missing that deeper meaning that's already built into them. It's already there. It's already built in. And you can go off for the rest of your life and you can kind of study these things. The meaning of numbers, the numerology in the Bible is one. Astrology. One time Lori and I attended a class. We met a lady who she sort of dedicated her life to understanding the ancient languages that were used in writing the Old Testament and the New Testament, and understanding the symbolism of the culture that they came from, and understanding what all of these little different nuances mean. And you can spend a lifetime doing that. There's people who take one word from the Hebrew or the Aramaic, and they will look at it and they will say, well, why was this word chosen instead of that word? And this word is made up of these different syllables and these different letters. And in that culture, each letter had a numerical value assigned to it. And if you look at what that means, you come to a deeper understanding. And for most of us, that is kind of beyond our reach. We just don't have the time or the resources to study all this stuff. This lady lived in Denver, and she used to go downtown. There's a large temple in Denver, a large Jewish community, and she went down to the university there and studied with the rabbis so that she could learn the nuances of the language. She came to kind of explain as much as she could to us in a couple of our lecture. And I'll just give you one example just to maybe whet your appetite. And she was talking about astrology, the astrology that's in the Bible. Now, as Christianity evolved, then the idea of our fate being governed by the stars, that didn't fit. So astrology was frowned upon. But yet there's evidence, that it was important. If you look at the three wise men, we're going to talk about in a minute, they followed the star. You see, they were studying the heavens. They followed the star. But just one example she gave us is in Christianity, the fish is a symbol of Christianity. You see people with the bumper stickers and they have the fish on there. And the early Christians used that as a symbol. You know, they could kind of draw it in the dirt, and it was a secret sign that, you know, basically said, "Are you Christian too?" But when Jesus was born, about the time that Jesus was born, that's when we entered the age of Pisces, the fish, and each age lasts for about 2,000 years. And as anybody who grew up in the 70s knows, we're at the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Well, the sign of Aquarius is the water jar. And if you read into the New Testament, at the very end of the New Testament, just before the crucifixion, Jesus tells his disciples to go into the village and look for the sign of the man carrying the water jar. And she said, so this is kind of a reference to the astrological signs. There's 12 apostles, there's 12 signs of the zodiac, all these different things that she kind of put together. So all I'm saying there are deeper meanings, and we can go into those deeper meanings, but we must do so with caution, because, you know, quite frankly, somebody can look at this and tell me that, well, this word meant something and it means this and it means this, and how would I know? See, I have to be willing to check it out, to dig into it. Just because somebody tells me doesn't mean it's so. Just because I tell you doesn't mean it's so. These are ideas to explore for your growth. So we come to this idea then that we have the scriptures laid out for us. And as Emmett Fox tells us, each character in the Bible represents a different state of consciousness, a different state of the soul, if you will. And we are, at different points in time, we are each and every character. We are evolving in that way. We can relate to the Pharaoh getting angry and wanting to punish the Israelites, the Hebrews, because we've been angry and we want to punish people too. So if we stop and look at each and every character in the story and say, why is that character in the story? Why were they given that name when they put them in the story? A more recent example, the original movie, The Matrix, you know, if you ever saw that movie, the name of the ship that they had was a reference to a king back in the Old Testament who led the people out of captivity, out of Babylon, you see. Names are chosen for a reason. Places are chosen for a reason. And when we are ready, then we who have eyes can see, and we who have ears can hear. But you must be willing to let yourself be open to intuition, and you must be willing to trust that what your intuition is revealing for you is right for you. Because, as I say, people can tell you anything. They'll make up anything. They can tell you anything, and they may believe it's true. But what we're looking for is what is true for you. What speaks to your heart? What is your heart saying to you today? So we have the journey of the soul that comes into its self-awareness in a state of disconnect from the divine. We've left the garden, but there's part of us that remembers the garden, you see. There's part of us that remembers, and we want to get ourselves back to the garden. As Judy Collins told us. So we enter into this state of awareness in a belief of separation, in the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil, in the experience of good and the experience of evil. But these are the dream experience, if you will. This is the illusion, if you would consider it. Illusion means looking at something and seeing something different, right? You're not seeing what's there, but you think it's something different. So you see a mirage on the desert and you think there's water, but there's really not water there. That's an illusion. as opposed to a delusion, which is just erroneous thinking. So we're in kind of this dream state, this Adam dream, as Goldsmith calls it, and we are trying to awaken from the dream. We are trying to awaken to the reality that, as Plato said, the reality that is outside the cave. We've been looking at the shadows on the wall and believed they were real, and now it is time to awaken to the fact there's a whole nother reality, there's a whole nother way of being, there's a whole nother way of thinking. Sometimes we get flashes of this, sometimes we get glimpses of it, and sometimes it evolves slowly as we continue to be dedicated to our growth. So we can set our intention as we did in the opening treatment. Reveal to me what I need to hear today. Reveal to me what I am ready to know today. Reveal to me where my good is today, that I may open that present. So we come now into the Christmas narratives, and we come in with the idea, the twofold idea, that first of all, the Christ is the presence of the divinity within us, within each and every one, but each and every one is not yet aware of it, because we have been allowed to awaken at our own time, at our own place, at our own speed. And we come into this idea that the symbolism that is there, that if we explore that symbolism, it can help us to come to a different understanding. And your understanding may be different than my understanding. You may be feeling and experiencing something that is different than what I am feeling and experiencing. But it is coming into this trust that whatever is appropriate for your spiritual growth, whatever is appropriate for my spiritual growth at this moment in time, that is the gift. That is the gift that we shall open today. So we look at the traditional stories, and you've heard them a million times. They're on TV. You drive around town, and there are mangers outside of many different churches, and some of them have live animals, and some of them have precious little children playing the characters in the Bible. And we have the shepherds, and we have the angels, and we have the manger, and we have the baby in the manger, and we have Joseph, and we have Mary, and we have all this. But all of that has symbolism, all of that has meaning. So one way to kind of work with trying to find the meanings is you can look at the etymology of the words. Where did the word come from? What is the origin of the word, and what does it mean? And another way is there is a Metaphysical Bible dictionary online. Unity Church puts it out. And it lists many of the different words used in the Bible, and it gives a metaphysical interpretation of what that word means. Now again, when you look at that, you have to say, well, how do I know that the person who created that definition, how do I know that they were right? And you don't know, right? You don't know. You can take that and you can work with it, and you can see how it feels to you. And you can see, well, but what does it mean to me? But what does it mean to me? So you could take these definitions, you could take the origin of the words and ask yourself, why is that word used? Why, for example, Bethlehem? Why, for example, Judea? Why, for example, the house of David? All of these things, and you can start to say, wait a second, there's something else going on here. So we have the Christmas narrative, and just one thing briefly I'll mention is in the four synoptic Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, each one was writing to a different audience for a different purpose. So just like the director of a TV show who says, I am going to include things in this scene that have meaning to my audience, and I'm going to exclude things from the scene that have no meaning to my audience, each one of these authors constructed their narratives in a certain way. And I don't know that it was one person that actually wrote each one of them, or many people, and divine inspiration guided people, and all of that comes into play. But the point is that they were crafted in a certain way. And if we don't understand the culture that it was slanted for, if we don't understand all that, taking things literally it's okay. It gets us started, but we're missing that deeper meaning. So the narratives of the birth of Jesus are only in 2 of the 4 Gospels. So John was about the mystical revelation. Luke has the most detail of the birth of Jesus, and theologians say they think that he got it directly from Mary, and I think it was Matthew has the other one. So we have two different narratives telling us 2 different aspects of the birth of Jesus for 2 different reasons, and they tend to get stuck together and combined together into one Christmas story. But it goes something like this, is that Mary, the Virgin Mary, had this apparition. The angel Gabriel appeared to her and told her that she was blessed among women, that she was going to bear the fruit of her womb, she was going to bear a child, and his name would be Jesus. And she says to him, well, how can that be? I'm a virgin. And he said, don't worry about it. With God, all things are possible. And I love that. Lori and I used to go to a restaurant down in Carolina Beach, and they had that painted on the wall. With God, all things are possible. With God, all things are possible. The Holy Spirit will be the father of this child, right? So this child is not an ordinary child. This child did not come into the world in an ordinary manner. Now she's engaged or betrothed to Joseph at the time, but she's too young to live with him. So they're living. She's promised to him, and they're living apart until she's of age that she can live with him. Excuse me while I get a drink of water. And of course, now he finds out she's pregnant, and this is scandal in those times, and she could be stoned for being pregnant and not being married. So he doesn't want her to be exposed. So his plans are he's just going to quietly divorce her and let her go her own way. But then the angel comes and appears to Joseph in a vision, in a dream. And it's very important how much of this is happening in visions and dreams, which tells us you can't take this literally. It's symbolism being revealed. And the angel tells Joseph, listen, everything's okay. This child is the child of God. And you're going to take care of him. You're going to raise him. And he's going to be called Jesus. So Joseph follows instructions. He's obedient. He does what he is told. And then there's a census, and this census requires everybody to go back to the town of their ancestry. Now, if you look in history, such a thing didn't happen. Right? There was never a census where people were required to everybody go back where you're born, go back to where your grandfather came from. It didn't happen. The purpose of census was to count people and get tax revenue. There was no need to have all that go on. But it's a literary construct that brings them out of Galilee into Judea, into Bethlehem, and that's for a reason. Now you got to ask yourself, well, why would they do that? Why would a writer create something that wasn't just to get them into Bethlehem for the purpose of the story? Why did that child have to be born in Bethlehem for the story? And I hope that I am kind of encouraging you to think about this, to dig deeper, to say, well, wait a minute. Why is that? Did I always just hear this story and take it to be a literal fact that there was this census that required people to get up and go back to their ancestral home? Or is there a deeper meaning here? Is there a deeper meaning here? Did God really bring Moses up to the top of the mountain and shake the ground and tell him not to steal each other's shoes? Or is there a deeper meaning here? See where we're going. So they go to the inn, because all of these people were in town and traveling. They go to the inn, and the innkeeper turns them away and says, "There's no room here for you." Right? So they have to. She's about to deliver the baby, so they go out into the stable, which is believed to have been in a cave. Right? Very interesting, because now you have bookends to the life of Jesus. He's born in a stable carved of rock, and after the crucifixion, his body is laid in a tomb, a virgin tomb that was never used, that is carved out of rock. So from the virgin womb in a cave to the virgin tomb in a cave. Symbolism. What is the meaning of this? What does it mean to you? But nevertheless, Mary gives birth to this child surrounded by the beasts of the field. And she wraps him in swaddling clothes and she lays him in the manger. Why in the manger? Why in Bethlehem? You see? And again, the angels go and they appear to the shepherds who are watching their flocks. And they announce to the shepherds that the Savior is born in Bethlehem. And they decide to go and visit and sing their praises, you know. And I mentioned a couple of weeks ago, Christmas is set in December. The shepherds wouldn't be out in the fields with their flocks in December. So this is set in December for a reason, around the solstice, around the light, for a reason. The shepherds are there for a reason, you see. And then we have the three wise men, the Magi, the Zoroastrian priests who are coming from Iran, coming from the east, and they were called by a star, you see. Like now astrology comes back into us. There was a sign in the heavens. There was a star that they followed. And they came and they stopped and they asked Herod. They said to Herod, you know, where is this newborn king? And Herod got a little rough there. He said, wait a second, I'm the king around here. And he said, well, when you find him, you let me know where he is, because I want to go and welcome him too. And of course, they were warned not to do this, not to tell him. So they go and they find the baby and they offer gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. Well, why those three gifts? You see, what is the symbolism of the gold? What is the symbolism of the frankincense? What is the symbolism of the myrrh? Why do we have the wise men from the east coming? Why did they follow the star? You got to ask all these questions now. So they leave, and they're warned, you know, not to tell Herod. So they leave and they go back a different way. Herod realizes that they're not coming to tell him where the child is, and he feels threatened by this newborn king. So he tells the soldiers, go out and kill all of the male children less than 2 years old, because he figures out this baby's not more than 2 years old. Now, I got to tell you, that didn't happen, so don't worry. That didn't really happen. We didn't slaughter a bunch of babies to please God. This is a story. This is a literal construct. But Joseph is once again warned in a dream that he needs to take this child to Egypt until things settle down, and he does. He takes this child to Egypt until Herod dies, and then he brings the child back. And there's more to the story. There's a presentation at the temple. There's all these things, but just that's the general gist of it. So now we start to ask ourselves, why did they have to be in Judea? Why did they have to be the house of David? Why did they have to be in Bethlehem? One thing I'll mention, this business about no room at the inn. In our modern day depictions of nativity plays, the innkeeper is usually portrayed as a grouchy old man who says, no, we don't have any room for you. In those days, the inn was like a dormitory. There was no place for a woman to give birth with any privacy. There was no room here for her to give birth. That's why she had to go to the stable. Why in the stable? Why surrounded by animals? Right? You've been in stables. Stables are kind of smelly places. Why would this child is going to be the Prince of Peace? Why born in a stable? Why the shepherds? Why watching the flocks at night when they wouldn't ever be there? Why the wise men and why Herod? So we start to piece things together. So the land of Judea is kind of the land of praising God, the metaphysical interpretation of it. Bethlehem means the city of bread. The house of David, David meant love, the house of love, see. Herod represents the ego. The shepherds in the field watching over their flocks represents people who are paying attention to their thoughts, their ideas. Remember we talked about the little sheep running around, kind of like the monkey mind in the East, the little sheep running around, paying attention to their thoughts. The wise men, see, those are the powers of the soul. These are the faculties of the soul that are already there, that we already have, but we are not aware of. See? And following the star is following our own internal guidance, following our intuition. Gold represents the riches of the Spirit, frankincense the beauty of the Spirit, and myrrh the eternality of the Spirit. These things take place at night. Many of these things take place in visions and dreams. Not just any night, but the darkest night of the year, the longest night of the year, the solstice. Right? Why? Why is the light coming into the world on the darkest night of the year? So if we put it back together again, and I'm just going to give you an example, I'm just going to give you an idea, maybe different than the idea that I gave you years before. But I'm going to give you this idea, and I want you to take it, and I want you to roll it around. Remember what we're doing is we're walking the razor's edge. We're using the intellect to kind of look at these things differently and to interpret these things differently. But what we're really trying to do is find that star within, that internal guidance. We're trying to find that intuition within us that leads us where we need to be to find the greatest Christmas present of all, the realization of the divine presence within. So in the darkest night of our soul, you see, in the darkest night of our soul, we are Mary. Mary means pure consciousness. We are pure consciousness. We are Mary. And in the darkest night of our soul, if we listen, the messenger of God, the angel Gabriel, meaning messenger of God or strength of God, the strength of God comes to us. It's there, you see, it's with us. And it reveals to us what we need to know. But remember I said last week, Mary gave the great fiat, the great act of faith, thy will be done. Thy will be done. And we used to say the prayer when I was growing up, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Thy will be done. She didn't understand intellectually, didn't comprehend intellectually, but the angel told her, trust in God. With God all things are possible. And she had this profound act of faith. Thy will be done. Joseph in the Bible is an interpreter of dreams and visions. Remember Joseph in a coat of many colors. The coat of many colors stood for harmony. But Joseph interpreted the dreams of the Pharaoh. Joseph has represented somebody who is aware of these inner symbols, aware of the inner intuition. And he protects the child. And he does also as he is told. He has faith. Right? And he takes care. He does the things that are appropriate for him to do. The child is born in the stable, and it is surrounded by the beasts of burden and the smells of the stable. And when we come into the world, when we come in as babies, whatever family we're born into, we kind of accept that as being the way it is, you know. Not until much later in life when we get old enough to afford psychiatrists that we go back and say, wait a minute, what was that all about? But, you know, we just accept everyone around us, whether they're dirty, whether they're smelling, We just accept them. And when the awareness of the presence of the divine comes to us, it comes as a child. It comes as a child. And yes, we have many other thoughts in our consciousness. We have many other things going on in our lives that are not quite where we would want them to be in terms of standing in the presence of the divine. Right? We have ideas of anger. We have ideas of hatred. We have all of these different human things that are still going on in our lives, but the presence of the awareness, or the awareness of the presence, comes to us as a small child. It is there. It is there. It has revealed itself to us. It is there. And it doesn't condemn us. It doesn't judge us. It doesn't complain any more than a child laying in the manger in the stable would complain about its environment. It just accepts it. The child is laid in a manger in the city of bread. Right? Bethlehem, the city of bread. And bread here represents all of our physical needs, not just food, but all of our physical needs. And this child is laid in the manger because it is what feeds the entire world. This experience of the presence of the divine within, that is ultimately what feeds us. Everything we have depends upon that. Joel Goldsmith says in his book Spiritual Supply that he was going through a period in his life where he was suffering challenges of supply, and he said he realized that if he really knew God, that wouldn't be an issue. So rather than trying to do things to fix his money issues, he went to work trying to know God more completely. God is our source, our substance, our supply, the air that we breathe, the lungs that breathe the air, the food that we eat, the intelligence that digests the food. All of this is an activity of the divine. And we become aware of it to a small degree as a child within. And then we have to nurture it so it grows. The shepherds represent people who are aware, who are paying attention to what they're paying attention to. This is, for months we've been talking about mindfulness. We've been talking about the fact that as human beings we have the ability to be self-aware, but we have to develop it and use it. So the shepherds are people who are paying attention. They're paying attention to their ideas. They're paying attention to what's going on in their mind, right? Remember, keep your mind on the things you want and off the things you don't want. Keep your mind turned to God. Keep your mind turned to love. Keep your mind turned to peace. And to those people, that presence within was revealed. The wise men, as I said, represent our spiritual faculties, these deeper faculties of the soul that already know that we are connected with the divine and are waiting for that revelation to us, waiting to be poked with a stick, to see that intuition, to see the star in the sky, to be led to where we need to go. And they followed it, and that's most important. How many times we get an intuitive idea, an impulse, and we don't follow it, and we say, well, I'm not sure that that's true. You have to learn to develop your intuition. You have to learn to listen when your heart is speaking to you. You have to learn that the gifts of the Spirit are the gold, the frankincense, and the myrrh. Now, Herod represents the ego. The intellect and the ego likes to be in charge. And when the ego starts to become aware that there's something more powerful than it, there is the presence of the divine within us, it feels challenged. It feels threatened. That's why when we sit down to meditate, our mind goes everywhere, right? The ego doesn't want to give up control, so it distracts us. This is Herod. This is Herod. This is Herod saying, I'm the boss around here. I don't want any other king. Jesus takes the child away to the land of Egypt, which is the land of confusion. And what happens to us sometimes is we become aware of the presence within us, but we're not quite ready to deal with that. We still have all of these ego issues to work out. So it goes and it hides for a while. It obscures itself again from our vision, and it obscures itself behind the confusion, behind the busyness of the monkey mind, behind the chatter that we're going through. But it's still there, you see. It is still there. It has always been with us. It will never leave us. It can never leave us. And then when the time is right, when the ego, when our ego comes into its death, when we start to stop believing everything that the ego tells us, everything that the intellect tells us, then the child can come back and can grow. And after the narratives, after the Christmas narratives, we are told that the child was nurtured for 12 years before it came to the temple. So what we must do is to discover that presence within, the Christ within. I invite you to look up the origin of the words, look up the narratives in the New Testament, go to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, take these different interpretations and stick them in the story, and say, well, what does this mean to me? Remember Meister Eckhart told his congregation, we're here to celebrate the birth of a baby 1,300 years ago in Palestine, but unless you know what it means to you personally, it may as well never have happened. What does this mean to you personally? What is your Christmas story? Are you willing to receive the gifts that have already been given? Are you willing to receive the experience of the presence of the divine within and nurture it as you would a child, as you would a baby? Are you willing to devote yourself to the growth of your own soul? So I suggest to you that that's one way of looking at the Christmas narratives. I invite you to find your way of looking at the narratives. Each and every one of us, we are a gift to the world, but we have to discover it, we have to nurture it, we have to unwrap it, and we have to give it. Merry Christmas, everyone. And so it is. And Reverend Laurie has picked out a